So we are live. As you can see, we're live and we're getting ready to go. If you're watching us, make sure you're signing in to share, comment, invite one another. Today is another powerful show after the one we had yesterday with King Maponga as he addresses Africans at home and abroad on the Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a very exciting conversation that we have. And today we have Baba Professor Dr. James Small in studio, and he's also going to take us through a series from his early life to his manhood, to marriage, to politics, to his vision and mission, to his connection to Africa, and finally to stories surrounding his assassination. So yes, if you're watching us now, please make sure you invite one another. And yeah, before we go, let me welcome.
You are watching the Pan African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for connecting. Thank you. Wherever you're joining, we welcome you on the Martin Luther Day 2. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day 2. So today, like we announced yesterday, we're having Professor Dr. James Small live with us today, someone who was so close and can actually tell us, who he was from the perspective of a native African American. And so we're also going to get some questions and interactions from and feedbacks from him and get his opinion and knowledge on this. So we are on the second day of this celebration. And yesterday we had a very interesting and powerful show yesterday with King Maponga. And we saw the audience interacting by sharing all the Pan-African heroes and sheroes that we all know, whether they're kings and queens or from the ancestors to the present ones. And it was very interacting, and I really love it. So we have a whole list of all your role models, your queens, your kings, whoever they had represented in your life in the process of the African freedom, justice, truth, one Africa, everything that is uniting us. Yeah. And so I want to welcome you again today on the show. I know we're a little bit late. It's my fault. And let us set the ball rolling. Good evening, Prof. Good evening. Welcome to the conversation.
Good evening, Dr. Tata. It's my pleasure. And I'm not going to let you take responsibility for being late. I'm the reason for being late. I take responsibility on that.
Yeah, but you were in the studio.
As always, it's an honor to be with you in Pan-African Daily TV to do what we do, try our best to bring an explanation of history and the truth to our people so that they may use that body of knowledge to navigate through this world, to make their lives a better life. That's all this is about. We're not entertainers, we are educators. Hopefully, we pray on that. But it's always an honor to speak to my people.
Wonderful. Let me just open the conversation in a very, I don't know, it's not taking us out. We are seeing the African Americans or the community and the country itself actually paying tribute and celebrating this day. They make it a very national day accordingly. Is it the same case with Malcolm X? Do Americans or the country makes this kind of a official celebration, taking days of office shutting down, and really like a national holiday? Is it the same case with ancestor Malcolm X?
No, the country did not declare Malcolm X Day a holiday. We declared Malcolm X Day a holiday 56 years ago. And Malcolm X Day is celebrated and was celebrated long before Dr. King's Day was celebrated. But we as a people celebrate Malcolm X Day across America every May 19th. I personally participate in a pilgrimage to his grave, which I've been able to do every year since his death with thousands of other people. And in every capital in America, Malcolm X Day have been celebrated since 1965. But we did not want the sanctioning of the nation, the national government, because the national government murdered both Malcolm and Dr. King, and we're not going to pretend they didn't. And so you do not have your murderer sanction your holiday, your holy days. I understand why our people fought to get Dr. King's birthday recognized as a holiday. I participated in some of that, but that wouldn't have been my druthers. African peoples should determine their holy days, whether the state recognize it or not. And on those days, do not go working for the state or anyone else to show your strength. And so the difference between Malcolm X Day and Martin Luther King Day is Malcolm X Day was declared by the African peoples. Dr. King's Day is declared also by the African people and the nation state of the US. As far as Malcolm is concerned, we do not require, nor do we desire, the United States sanctioning of the celebration of our heroes' day.
Okay, wonderful. That is explanatory a lot. Like we have to decide who we celebrate is not a matter of a national day or not. That's very
Right.
clear, and I thank you so very much
It's
for
an
that.
ancestral question.
Mm.
It's an ancestral question.
Okay, what is that supposed to mean?
I knew you would ask that. Good. All peoples are guided by their ancestors. If you look at the Jewish community, every single holiday that they have, and they have more holidays than any other ethnic group in the world, all of them is tied to an event involving one of their or more of their ancestors. That's what holy days are. Okay. If you look at the Christian calendar, the Western Christian calendars, all of their holidays have to do with an experience or an episode in the life of one of their ancestors. If you look at American holidays, all of the holidays has to do with an experience in the life of one of their ancestors that did something that the group think is so worthy, they want to remember and replicate it. That's what holy days are. We call them holidays. They're holy days. They're when you take an ancestor who has sacrificed for your betterment and you do not want to forget them. Matter of fact, you want to replicate and duplicate their behavior and their character. That's what these days are about. That's what they should be about.
Absolutely true. Totally correct. I agree with you. And we are getting into a period for us on the Pan African Daily, and I think particularly on the continent, is very relevant. And that's why I actually thank Maponga Joshua, who opened this conversation yesterday, making it very, very universal that this is the time we have to start really placing our own holidays, like you say, holy days, according to our own prophets, according to our ancestors, according to our freedom fighters, according to our people who stand up for us. And so yesterday we said, so we, as a matter of fact, we have to get days, Professor James Small Day, Dr. Susan Tata Day, and all the days that actually are assigned to us, the Nefertiti, the Quinzinger, and so people, Thomas Sankara, everyone was just pouring it down. Do you think that should be, I mean, not that do you think, that should be the right approach, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. But I think that holy days should be reserved for the ancestors and not the living. I think because as long as we're living, we're still coming into being, and our mission is not yet complete on earth. Once we become an ancestor, we've left the blueprint for others to follow. And so the most revered of those ancestors is the ones that should be remembered. I don't know if I'll ever number amount that, but the point is people replicate and duplicate and innovate on what has gone before them. And who better to replicate and duplicate, and whose character is better to innovate on than that of those people who try to make your world and your life better. And that is primarily your ancestors.
Correct.
All people refer to their ancestors. African people is the only one that seem to be stumbling when it comes to referring to their ancestors. People say, well, Christianity don't do that. Everybody in the Bible is dead. Let's back up. Every character in the Bible is an ancestor of Christianity.
Correct.
Every character in the Bible is dead. Christianity is a total system of ancestral worship. Okay? Isaac, Esau, Jacob, Mary, Martha, John, Peter, Emmanuel, whomever, they're all dead. So if you're referencing them, you're referencing the ancestors of that culture you call Christianity. So stop playing. Let's be real and honest so we understand what we're doing. You go to Japan, they have a religion, it's called Shinto. It's all about ancestral revering. You go to India, they have Buddha. It's all about the ancestor revering. Any culture you go to, everybody reference their ancestors. The African is the only ones since slavery and colonialism that turn their back on their ancestors. And that's why we're in trouble. And until we turn it around, how do you say, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, and I believe in honoring thy mother and thy father, that my days may be long upon the earth, but only if they're not African? Is that what you're saying? That you will honor your mother and your father only if they're not African. Just think about it now, because we don't think about what we do. And so when we're talking about honoring Dr. Martin Luther King, we're not talking about honoring a body. The body is in the ground rotting, going back to the minerals that created it. The energy is in space doing its thing. When we talk about honoring Dr. King, we talk about honoring the quality and the attributes that he displayed and demonstrated in our behalf while he was here.
Absolutely.
Courage, the empathy, the justice, the honesty, all of those courage that made him a great leader. That's what we're honoring on Martin Luther King Day. The character, I think it was Marcus Garvey that said the greatest thing a man have is his character. You know? And so when we think about celebrating Dr. King's Day, we're celebrating the character of a courageous young man Remember, he is murdered, assassinated at 39. So most of the years that he's fighting for our behalf and getting thrown in jail and getting beaten up and getting the fame in the white media, he's in his 20s and 30s. He's a child. I'm 77.
Mm.
He's a child. He's dead before his 40th birthday at the hands of the enemies of the Black race. And so that's why we honor him. He had the courage to use his youth to defend his race, defend righteousness, defend justice, defend honesty and integrity in the human character. And for that, he's murdered. And we want to remember who he was and what he did. It wasn't just about a march. It wasn't just about a sit-in. It took character to go on that march because you knew people wanted to kill you when you got there. You knew you were going to get beaten over the head with sticks. You knew they were going to put dogs on you that would tear your flesh apart. You knew they were going to spray the water hose that would rip your clothes off and rip your flesh. But you went anyway because you were fighting for justice. And you were fighting for truth. And you were fighting for the human and civil rights of a people who were human beings and were not treated as human beings. And you says, I'm willing to die if I must. And in the end, he did to change this. That's what we're talking about. That's what made him a great man. He was a little boy, 39 years old. All of my children are older than him. All of my 6 children is older than this man was when he died for me and for you. He didn't have his arms stretched out on a cross. Nevertheless, he died for me and for you. He took a bullet that took his whole face off for me and for you. Talking about dying for someone. And should we remember someone who would say, I could live to be an old man if I just shut my mouth. I can live to be an old man if I just go in the pulpit and preach and make you feel good on Sunday. I can be an old man if I don't march for voting rights. I can be an old man if I don't march to give you better jobs. I can be an old man if I don't march and picket and get beaten, thrown in jails to make sure you have better housing. I can be an old man if I don't do any of those things. I can be an old man if I don't criticize the government. But he chose to put his youth on the line and said, rather than be an old man, I will be a champion of justice. I'll be a champion of righteousness. I'll be a champion of empathy. I'll be a champion of reciprocity. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, the enemy of justice took his life. Not a single man, not James Earl Ray. James Earl Ray probably never was even in that city when that happened. James Earl Ray probably didn't pull that trigger. The person responsible for the death of Martin Luther King is the government of the United States of America and its military and paramilitary apparatus. They've been killing our people from the death of Patrice Lumumba to the death of Kabila in the Congo, to the death of the head of the PAC in South Africa, when they wanted to project the ANC in South Africa. America has been jolly on the spot, along with Israel and Britain and Belgium and France and Germany, and they still are. And we cannot be afraid. It's freedom or death. Either we understand what we're celebrating when we celebrate this man, or we don't. We are celebrating the best qualities that God will allow to be developed in a human being and then displayed in action. That's what he did. He developed the best qualities that God has given him and he
Mhm.
took it in action to bring about justice for other human beings. And for that, he lost his life early. All of us are going to lose our life on the journey in life. It all comes to an end. But his didn't have to end at 39. As brilliant as he was, he could have done so much more. But a system of oppression wouldn't let him live unless he lived as a part of the criminal apparatus, economically and politically, that runs the world. Because he chose to live like God desire, they murdered him. And that's the context I put it, because I don't have time to play the game, because this is real. And all of us, even you, Miss Susan, when you take certain stance, you put yourself in jeopardy in the world. When I take certain stance, I put myself in jeopardy in the world. There are people who don't want to see justice. There's people who do not want to see people exercising civil rights as a part of a state citizen. There are people who don't want to see people having their human rights as a citizen of certain states, because others want to make money and wealth off of those who they can exploit. Well, Dr. King stood against exploitation. And I think one good example to see and really feel Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech is a magnificent piece of oratory, but that's the real speech you need to listen to. You want to see Dr. King, you want to see the foundation of Dr. King, go back to 1957. Go online and pull up the speech, The Birth of a New Nation. That speech he wrote after returning from Ghana, West Africa. Yes, Dr. King was in Africa in 1957, standing beside Kwame Nkrumah, being photographed with Kwame Nkrumah, and helping the Ghanaian people welcoming their independence. Okay? This is before any of his civil rights activities that we find notable. So that's the foundation of the man. So if you want to understand a person, go back to their foundation. And when you read the speech he wrote in 1957 upon returning from Ghana, it's called The Birth of a New Nation. Then you see the foundation of Dr. King. And the media fantasy that they tried to create will not block your vision, because he tells you then who he is and what he believes. He tells you how much he loves Africa, and he tells you how much he loved being Black. In one of his speeches, he said, somebody told a lie, he said. He said, somebody told a lie and said Black wasn't beautiful. He said, but I'm here today to tell you that I am Martin Luther King. I am proud and I'm Black and I'm beautiful. Okay? But they don't play that, do they? They don't tell you he said that, do they? This man was a scholar who understood African history, who understood African culture. He's a theologian who understood the Bible and the roots of the Bible, and how much of that Bible has its foundation in African spiritual tradition. He knew that. He wasn't blind. A blind man don't do what he did. He had a vision based on truth. He had a vision based on honesty. He had a vision based on justice. He had a vision based on history that was rightfully observed. So I know that's a long answer to your questions, but
no, it's just pretty good, and you're actually putting the basics, and of course we have to understand that, because like you said, it's a teaching. We are teaching. We are an educational platform. We are not entertaining. We are not creating content, but we are educating ourselves. Yesterday, King Maponga said something very relevant. Exactly what you said. Like, he as a theologian, or he was actually motivated to study theology because of Dr. Martin Luther King. He listened to all his sermons, he listened to all his speeches. And for that reason, I mean, his whole life, entire life, and even what he's also trying to do now by exposing actually the reality or interpreting the context of the Bible in based on the African spirituality, said he got it all from Dr. Martin Luther King. That is the dream that he had, isn't it? To empower, to impact, and to
Right.
give the vision.
Well, a lot of emphasis has been placed on Martin's dream. And based on the speech he did in Washington in 1963 in the March of Washington, he did a speech with the last concluding paragraph being about this dream. Now, that last paragraph was not a part of his written speech. That was an ad-libbing of a sermon he had done in Detroit a couple of months before, where Mahalia Jackson, the singer, was present. And while he was speaking in Washington, things in the speech as he was trying to wrap it up was kind of low, didn't have that Holy Ghost power. So Mahalia Jackson leaned over to him and says, "Martin, tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream, Martin." And then he took the sermon he did in Detroit 2 months ago before, and he ad-libbed that sermon in the concluding of his speech in Washington in 1963. Of course, the West took that and the media took that and made that the theme of the speech, but that was not the theme of the speech. The theme of the speech was really reparations. The theme of the speech that day was that the American government had given the African people a check that had come back insufficient funds. I mean, your check bounced. And then he talked about slavery and how we worked for no salaries. And he talked about what was owed to us. That was what the speech was really about. And the injustice of all of that. But after he would try, you know, if you're an orator, you always try to wrap your speech up so you're at the top of the mountain. Well, he couldn't seem to get there. And that's when Mahalia said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about the dream." And then he ad-libbed that part of his speech that he had done earlier in Detroit. And his dream was explaining his hope and aspirations for the possibility of what America could be. And he wanted to let the world understand that he was beyond the pessimism of racism, that he was beyond the pessimism of state terrorism that was being practiced against his people. The dogs, the fire hoses, the police baton beatings, the rape in the jails, and all of the things they did to our women who was arrested during those demonstrations. That he was above all of that, that he saw the possibility for a greater nation, thus a greater world. And that was predicated on him coming from a place inside of him, representing his ancestors that said, we're a greater people than that. We're a greater people than that. And he always made it clear. He always referenced back to his people. He always referenced back to his people suffering. He even did that in the speech when he was speaking in 1964, receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. He said he was receiving the Peace Prize on behalf of those of his people who were suffering in the fight for justice. He said it in his speech. That was always the theme of his life. That is not about me. I'm willing to sacrifice me because these other people have sacrificed themselves in the struggle for voter rights, in the struggle for good education, in the struggle for decent home, in the struggle for health care, in the struggle for economic opportunity. People are dying in the streets every day for these things across the world. And my people right here in America are dying for these same things. And so me, Dr. Martin Luther King, I'm willing to be their drum major. You know, the drum major is the guy that's in front of the band, and he sets the rhythm of the band goes. The band then march behind that one. And so he wanted to be a drum major, like he said, for justice. He wanted to be a drum major for truth. And he was just that. He was a hell of a leader and a hell of a model. And so we celebrate his day because we want to emulate the model, imitate the model, then innovate on the model. Emulate, imitate, innovate on the model of the character of the man called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, so that's going beyond just the memory of some phraseology. I was looking at some of his quotes, and one of them, he said, I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness. He's very clear what he's fighting for. I'm fighting for justice, peace, and righteousness. He said we shall overcome because the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice always. He's clear about why he's fighting. He's fighting for justice because there's an environment where injustice is predominant. He's fighting for righteousness because there's an environment where righteousness is trampled upon. You know, he's fighting for freedom because there's so many people, because of the color of their skin, is being denied basic human and civil freedom in the society they live in. So he's very clear what he's about. That's why he's worth remembering. That's why he's worth celebrating. And then in all of that, he gave his youthful life for us, knowing every day that he went out there was the possibility he would never come back. And one day he went out and he didn't come back to us.
Could you just give us?
But I love.
Could you just?
And in my ignorance, when I was young, I didn't love him like I do today, because I didn't know him like I do today. I was so radically nationalist that his peaceful, it wasn't even peaceful, nonviolent approach, because nonviolent isn't always peaceful, because nonviolent can be violent. And in almost all the acts they committed, violence was involved. People got beat up, people got killed, people went to jail, you know? And so I thought that method, give me a gun, I'm ready to go shoot him up, bang, bang, which was not, didn't work. We tried it, it didn't work. Dr. King's method, it wasn't just his, but him and his comrade, was the better method for the time under the circumstance. And given the environment we found ourselves in the country we found ourselves in at that time.
Mm. Could you give us a little background about his early days, like who was his mom, where he was born?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He was born, yeah, he was born in January 15, 1929 in Atlanta. At that time, Atlanta, Georgia was one of the most racist. Today, we go to Atlanta and we see this big, Black, progressive, wealthy community. But then, Atlanta was one of the most racist cities in America. He was born in a family where his father was a minister. Mm-hmm. And his mom was as much a minister as an evangelist in the church. At that time, they would have been in a middle class, what we would call today a middle class Black family. And the community he lived in, he played with young white men. There were young white men and women who played with him, even though when it was time to go to school, he went to school, to a Black separate school, and they went to a white separate school. But they grew up in what was called Jim Crow, which was white terrorism against Black people, particularly in the southern part of the United States. And so they had to live and grow into that. But he was the father would use Christianity very strategically to teach his children. And he would have Bible class after dinner every night in the home so the kids could learn the Bible. Martin was a very aggressive young man, actually. In some ways, we would have wondered why he didn't become as militant as Malcolm in certain ways. And in some ways he did. But he did something that Malcolm X did. At a very early age, he remembered, he studied the dictionary. When you hear him speak, you can hear that he's mastered the vocabulary of the English language. And that came from an early studying of the dictionary. He goes to college early, 15 years old. He's in one of the most prestigious Black colleges in America, Morehouse. And his tutor, and I forgot the name of the president of the college, but becomes one of the most powerful Black minds in America. So he's tutored by one of the most powerful Black civil rights mind in America while he's at Morehouse College. And so by the time this young man would get a PhD, is the time most people are just going into college getting a bachelor's degree. So he's ahead of the curve. He's actually an academic genius. Okay. And he was going to school initially, I think, to be an attorney. He wasn't going to school initially to be a minister. He ended up in the ministry based on just the things he saw going on in the community and the things he would learn from other ministers who was into Black theology, because there is something called Black theology in America that most people don't understand. And it is how the Africans interpreted Christianity and as a tool to use in their circumstances. So Dr. King became a master of that. So when he would eventually become the minister of the church in Alabama, he's only 27 years old. Rosa Parks sits on that bench. You're talking about a 27-year-old young man. I think your eldest boy is just, what, 5 or 6 years younger than him? Yeah. So he wasn't much older than your son. He's taken on the mantle of leading the Black world in America at that time. But the foundation that he comes from is an African family in America who has the church as his foundation. And if you know anything about the Black church in the southern part of the United States, we weren't allowed to set up African churches, even though we did have our churches in the bushes. We did practice our indigenous tradition, but we had to do that very clandestinely. But we were able to build these churches. And in the churches, we were able to bring our African spirituality into the church, our African attitudes, our African proverbs, our African ideas, our African music, our African drumming. Even though we couldn't use drums, we used the clapping of the hands as drums and the stomping of the feet as drums, but we still had our African drum rhythm as a part of what created the music that we call Black spiritual, or today they other names. And so out of that Black church, out of that African church, out of a people who were just one generation out of slavery in North America, his parents was the first in his family to be born out of slavery. The memory of slavery is a part of our everyday conversation. The terrorism of slavery by the Ku Klux Klan and the White Knights and the other terrorist organization is an everyday occurrence in the Black community in the South, especially in Georgia, where he's growing up. So he's seeing all of this. This is his environment. And what you see as Martin Luther King is his response to that environment. You understand? His ministry is his response to that tyranny against his people. And we can couch it in all kinds of frameworks if we want to, but you see a young African man responding to the tyranny that his whole race has to go through. And he uses Christianity and he uses the power of the church. Now, all of the Christian church in the South did not support Martin Luther King. And that's why he had to start his own organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, because the Baptist Convention didn't support him. Now, I'm sure the ME across the board didn't support him. Then there was another organization called the CME, the Colored Methodist, but they didn't really. Some people supported him and some didn't, but the organization generally did not. The one organization that did support him that we don't hear much about is the Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is an African-based Masonic organization started in the 1700s, which is the biggest Black organization in America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's a part of that. And so this organization is a part of his support base. And along with the new organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which he founds, he is one of the founders of. And he doesn't, the movement in the South is not his movement. The movement he grows into is already in full bloom. He gets brought in because of his skills as a minister to be the spokespersons or to articulate the views or to rally the people. That becomes his role. People are fighting for voter registration in all of the southern cities before he was born. But now they had a champion who had a PhD. They had a champion who could speak eloquently. They had a champion who understood the system politically. They had a champion which understood American culture. And that champion is being called upon by the ministers and Black political leaders in different cities and towns all over the South and the Midwest to come and speak for us in your eloquence, so that the world can hear what we're trying to say. And once he had been established as an instrument in white media and the whole world was looking to hear his voice, he became the premier spokesman for the African American movement against state terrorism, against those who violated our human rights and our civil rights. And his youth prepared him for that. Growing up in the Baptist church, growing up in a Southern household, which was basically an African village household, growing up in a household where the mother and father were together and strong, growing up in a household where your grandmother was there or your grandfather was there and strong. That type of family structuring allow him to learn the things the father and the mother was trying to teach, and the community in which he was in. It wasn't just the father and the mother. It was a whole community. Like we said, it takes a village to raise a child. That's true in America, just as it's true in Cameroon. It doesn't change based on location. And so he's a product of that. He's a product of an African village. He's a product of a people who are being oppressed. And because of his training and teaching, it is clear he's trained and been taught to respond against that oppression. And he does it eloquently for the rest of his adult life.
This is so touching. You see, everyone is just listening. We are learning, and I hope the our young people, people on the continent, are for this very essential class. I'm learning a lot as well. Thank you so very much, Prof. What would you like? Like I said, I got a comment from someone who said, Dr. Martin Luther King brought the vision. The African youth should actually implement the vision. What would you say to that? Like he had a dream, but the African youth should implement the dream.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish the statement, Susan. Sorry.
Yes. No, like, I mean, he actually said Dr. Martin Luther King had a dream, and now the youth or African youth at home and abroad should implement the dream. That, like, they should be the practical dream. What would you say to that?
That's a nice statement, but Dr. King didn't have a dream. Dr. King was articulating his people's dream.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King articulated, he wasn't leading a fight, like a sister's talking about the Birmingham jail. He didn't live in Birmingham. He wasn't leading the fight in Birmingham. He was called by a community already fighting to assist them in leading the fight. See, we've got to change our view of what leaders look like in reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's only one man. He couldn't have done anything. But there were hundreds and hundreds of Black youth that was following him. Most of them was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. This is the youth. All movements in history is youth made, is the foundation is all youth. All the people that followed Dr. Martin Luther King, 90% of them was below 25. Okay? We see the elders on the front line. That's what elders are supposed to be. But look at who's behind the elders. It's the youth of the community. What the youth have to learn from Dr. King is not to create a demagogue like white society create demagogues, Superman, superhero, Batman. That's not what this is. What Dr. King is a representative of the aspiration of his people. And he used his skills and his talent to articulate that aspiration for his people.
Absolute. Voice of the voiceless, yes.
This is his people's dream. This is his people's aspirations. He is a skilled, well-tooled young member of the community. He uses skills and his tooling and his training to articulate the aspirations, the desires, and the dreams of his people. If you view him like that, you'll see the movement as a people's efforts, and you'll see yourself as a tool that should tune yourself to be able to advance the people's efforts.
Absolute. This is real. This is powerful. I'm trying to, I'm trying to let it sink when you say, it's representing the aspirations of the people. It's not about him. It's the same thing that we see ourselves as the leaders of today. Our work or our mission in educating or, telling our own stories is not about us, isn't it? It can never be about us.
No.
It is the vision through our ancestors, through the Most High, that we communicate the aspirations. And we begin to also understand these aspirations aligning already with the visions of the people. That's what, if it's about let us unite, he said it. And in that famous speech, when you said, I have a dream that, we have to read that speech. With Amadeus.
That one day, and he talks about the children of the world racially, that one day they could live together in some harmonious environment. And who would fight for anything less than that, right? But he's articulating it in a forum with hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, D.C., with the President of the United States listening in, with the Congress listening in, with all the people that make all the powers in America focus on that moment in time. So he has to articulate for the people the message that he wants the power that be to hear and to get. And he delivered. He delivered on that day the message that the people wanted him to deliver to the powers that be in America, the Supreme Court, the Congress, and the President of the United States, the governors from around the states, the mayors in the city. That's who he's speaking to, not that audience there. Yes, he's speaking to that audience, but the main audience is the powers that be. And he's articulating the aspirations of the masses of people. People didn't come down to Washington because they were on a picnic. People came because they needed jobs. People came because they needed protection from the law against violence. People came because they needed a decent education so their family would have an opportunity and a chance to make it in life. And so people went to Washington on that march. And they chose this young man to explain to the powers why we have come to the seat of power. And that's what he did with that speech. He explained to the powers that be why these hundreds of thousands of people is here on your front lawn. And he did the job. And the aspects of the speech that has to do with the dream, it would be wrong and it would be a crime to think that the speech was about, I have a dream. That's not what the speech is about. I have a dream is the summary conclusion of the speech if the things that's said in the body of the speech is adhered to and met by the government of the United States and the powers that be. That would be the most true way to understand what happened in Washington that day.
Mm-hmm.
And
This week, yes.
Mama Susan. Because any leader, and especially this beautiful young man, any leader is only there because the people have chosen you to lead. And if a people have chosen you to lead, it's because something the people want said, it's something that people want done, it's something that people want listened to by the forces and the power that controls the economic, politics, and culture of their life. And Martin was a brilliant scholar. He was a brilliant orator. He was a believer in the power of the divine. He believed in God to the point he knew God. Okay. And once you know God, then you can take the words of any language and articulate the God framework. This is how it would look if God did it. And that's what he did in that speech that day. So you've got to read the whole speech to see what he was dreaming about. People say, oh, they love the I have a dream, and everybody only read that last paragraph. What was the dream? You have to read the speech. The dream was about you owe us money for working us in slavery and working us to death and never paid us. The dream was you owe us opportunity so we can make a living for ourselves in America. The dream was you owe us access to good education in America. You see? So when you read the speech, then you know what he's calling a dream. Most people have never read the speech, so they don't know what the dream is.
Absolute. That's so true.
Yes.
That's so true. It only ended with I have a dream. That's all.
Right.
We've actually never. And this week we're going to go through the speech as well.
Go through the speech and see what was the dream he's talking about. Because he had just spoken about the dream. But what was it? You see?
And he equally had a lot of quotes, like Easy D is saying, one of my favorite quotes is, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yeah, he knew how to use language.
Yes.
Language has a purpose. Some people can talk and they don't say nothing. But others can talk and people will hear something completely different using the very same words, because language has a purpose. Language is supposed to convey to the listener the aspiration of the one who's articulating the language. If the listener don't hear the aspiration, because language wasn't used properly, and he used to say that all the time, I want to get the language right.
Yes.
I want to get the language right. Because he understands, I can say this thing, but if I don't say it exactly right, with the right tempo, with the right pitch, with the right emotion, with the right fanfare, you won't hear the meaning. It's like in Yoruba land or many African languages, you're from Cameroon, there's sometimes 4 and 5 meaning to one word. But it depends on the pitch of the word, right? It depends on the articulation of the word. It depends on how long you make the vowel, or how short you make the consonant, using the same word, but it means different things. Well, all languages are like that to a degree. And Dr. King was the master of rhetoric. He was a
Yes.
master of oratory. He was a master of the English vocabulary because he knew what the words meant, you know. And
Completely agree.
he was so trained in the Baptist church in African spirituality. And I know it's hard for a lot of the brothers and sisters because we have been so opposed to what the church means generally. We don't understand that most Black churches in America were really African churches. Just move the word Black out the way and call us who we are. Then they're African churches, aren't they? So who's in the African church? An African, isn't it? And what is the African being in an African church? The African is being an African in the African church, isn't he or she? So we may have had to modify the African image so the enemy couldn't see it, but we never modified the African spirit. And that's what you're seeing. How do you go into a church and you're in there with 300-400 of your people, and you've already told them, I'm going to march down to the city hall, and all along the route is the Ku Klux Klan with their shotguns and their rifles and their threats to blow up your church, which they do, and kill your little baby girls. So you know they'll do it. And the police is out there armed with their bully club to beat you up. And you have no weapons, but you go in your church and you sing, ain't gonna let nobody turn me round, turn me round, turn me round, ain't gonna let nobody turn. And you take that sound, those words, and you raise it to a spiritual level that 500 people walk out in that street with no weapons in their hand but the Spirit of God in their mind and go up against the guns, the Klan, the police, the fire hose, and the billy club, and you don't take one step back. What is that? What is that? The world wants to know what we did? Look at us being African spiritually. We had no guns in our hands. They had the guns. They had the law on their side. They could beat our brains out, and the law would say they were right. And we said, before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my God, and I will be free. And I will say this over and over and over until I got the courage to march in that street against all of the forces against hell. And we did it. Our ancestors did it. And they changed the world for every African in the world, not just in the United States, because the United States was influencing the entire world after 1945. But dominating the world economically after 1945. And we said we will bring you to your knee if you do not give justice to the African people. And so we forced them to pass a civil rights bill. And we forced them to pass an affirmative action bill giving us the right to work without discrimination. And we forced them to pass other kinds of voters' rights bill giving us an access to elect the people who would represent us in government, and on and on and on, without being afraid, or even in spite of being afraid. And you look at those marches, there was young people, teenagers. Most of those people were teenagers. It was the youth of the day. Martin himself was much more than a teenager. 7 years out from being a teenager. It was the youth of the day. And that's what we need to understand. I'm saying to the Black youth, stop marginalizing yourself. You have been in the forefront of every struggle in the African world. If you go into the jungles of Namibia, look at the age of the young people in Swapo. The medium age in Swapo was 18. Okay. Go to Mozambique. Go to Guinea-Bissau, PIGC. What was the minimum age of the soldier in the bush? 18 to 25. You know. Go look at MPLA in Angola. What was the medium age of the revolutionary in the bush? And you will see people are trying to peripheralize you, make you think the youth and the adult was opposed to one another. That has never happened in our history. The youth have been an intricate part of all revolutionary movements. the leadership of
Absolute.
African people. You got to
Mm.
study your history and give yourself a foundation to stand on. That's all history is. It's a foundation on which you stand to plot tomorrow. You know, the foundation in which you decide how to deconstruct yourself and reconstruct yourself as the African, like Susan say, the African you want to be. And so Dr. Martin Luther King, he showed you how to do it. He showed you, I may have this suit on and this tie on, but I'll let them beat me down in the dirt. I'll let them twist my arms behind my back. I'll let them beat me with the billy club because I want you to have a better future. And you're going to say that generation did nothing for you? That generation
Honestly.
gave their lives for you.
Wow. Shouldn't they be having all their effigies, all their symbols and signs in every schools, on every curriculum, books written on them with their covers, money and their effigies on it, flags and everything? I mean,
I
this is what
agree.
we're saying.
And I agree. And that's what this generation have to fight for. But until we get it in the schools, let's have it in our homes. Every Black home should know all of our heroes. Someone should know when they walk down the street as a teenager, that before you become a teenager, you should know who is Emeka Brown. What is its relevance to the revolution in Guinea-Bissau against Portuguese colonialism, genocide, and occupation? You know, who's Queen Nzenga? She's not just a name. She was a Black woman, a king of her people, who stood up against the tyranny of the Portuguese Empire on behalf of that people. What were her qualities and attributes that we want to teach to our children? So all of them will aspire to be Nzenga. Nzenga of Angola, our mother. Sing songs to her, write poetry to her, paint pictures of her, put her in the coloring books for our children to dream about. Dream about Yaa Asantewaa. They thought Yaa Asantewaa was the queen mother of Ajisu and Ashanti in Ghana. What else was Yaa Asantewaa? She was a mother. She was the spirit of a nation. When the British defeated the main army, people say, oh, the men ran. No, the men of Ashanti never ran from anybody. But the British military had conquered the leadership. So they thought, because they thought the males were the leadership. And then Africa showed that's not how we are structured. And then rose up the Queen Mother, who rallied her people and said, let's give the tyranny to the enemy that has brought tyranny to us. What courage would it take for a woman? You know, and I'm blessed. I got to go to her funeral when her body was brought back from the Seychelles, her remains, by Jerry Rollins, and given a full state funeral in Ghana. You know, and so we need to know these. This is how you build. These are the building blocks of the African youth character. Absolutely. If our youth is confused, it's because they're built of somebody else's character.
Absolutely.
When you build them based on our ancestral character, Ida B.
Yeah,
Wells, a beautiful young woman like Ida B. Wells, who lives in Memphis, Tennessee. And he watched 3 Black businessmen lynch because their businesses was outdoing the white business. And so they arrested for a crime they didn't commit. And then the mob and the terrorists come and break them out of jail and lynch them. And this young girl says no. And she writes an article in Memphis, which was a terrorist state worse than anything you saw in apartheid in South Africa. Okay. And they tried to kill her. They blow up her office. But you think she ran? You think she stopped? She spent her entire life traveling all over the world, fighting against lynching and terrorism and murder against her people. How many of our youth know Ida B. Wells and would want to be an Ida B. Wells Barnett? That's your holy one. Dr. King is in line with these people. You know, Dr. King is in line with Marcus Garvey. Dr. King is in line with W.B. Du Bois. Dr. King is in line with Patrice Lumumba. You know, that the king is in line with the brother, the Kabaka of the Bakongo people in Uganda, who was imprisoned by the British for standing up against the invasion of their land. But if you know your history through your ancestry, you'll never forget your history because you'll be so busy imitating all these ancestors. I can be any one of them. On any given day, I got a different ancestor having a ball with my body, just doing their thing. I hope people understand that. I don't want to go too far out. But history erases your enemy's mystery, gives you your foundation to plan your tomorrow. Martin Luther King was a shining example of that love for his people. This is about a man loving freedom, loving his people who was denied freedom enough to die for them. But I know you had some questions, Miss Susan.
Yes, I have a question here. There's I think it's just an opinion on that opinion. I want to get your opinion on it. Like, I have an opinion here that what does that mean? Or in the speech where Dr. Martin Luther King gave, he said, "I have led my people into a burning house." And so, what was that supposed to mean? Or what's your opinion on that? Because there's some opinions to see if, yes.
Yes, that statement after much time in the movement, he made that statement pretty much near the end of his life because he was talking about trying to integrate into the greater American society. But he now felt that that greater American society was not what it pretended to be. Okay. So instead of leading my people into something that was better than we had in our separate societies, I've led them into a burning house because America was engaged in the war in Vietnam, where it was committing genocide against the people of Vietnam. And Dr. King spoke out against that war because of the genocide against the people of Vietnam, but on the fact that it was also taking the resources from America that could help the impoverished people in this nation. And all of those things were unjust. And because of the behavior of corporate America backed by government America, the house that we wanted to integrate into appeared to be a burning house and not a place of sanctuary. And so that's what he's talking about.
Ashe. Ashe. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Like, others were saying, do you have the opinion like, he was being used by the American intelligence?
That's silly. That's childishness. If you read that America has something that our people voted for, it's called the Freedom of Information Act. You can get almost any body of information you want on any person that has ever been a political activist in this country. And one of the most attacked activists in this country by the intelligence community was Martin Luther King. And that same intelligence community eventually assassinated him when they couldn't stop him. The one thing Martin Luther King was never, not even in thought, is a collaborator. You'll see where they even tried to get to get him to commit suicide.
Sorry, want to drink something? Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I mean, he will be coming back. Yes, let him just drink some water. Like, if you have comments or questions or anything you've read about or any other opinion, remember we're telling our stories by ourselves, and we're actually getting history or learning from professors that have done the research, gone on it. But like we said, nobody has the total opinion about knowledge. We're here to commemorate and celebrate the good works. The simple question would be like, why will I work for a secret intelligence that assassinated me? Did I betray them or they betray me? So some of things are just compass a simple knowledge, which is normal, that we ourselves can actually, reflect from our own simple point of view. It's the same thing like King Maponga asked yesterday, like, how would you assassinate somebody and then you are even celebrating and putting a holiday, and so these are opinions, and these are questions that we can question. We are not debating with anyone, but go do your research and
Yeah.
be sure what your intentions are, because that's also that kind of a spirit. We know that we sometimes we're misled, we are bought over, we are, but you can feel from the spirit. And those that are bought over, are they killed? If we look at Thomas Sankara, if we look at Patrice Lumumba, those that were assassinated, who would assassinate somebody that is working for me? And so we have to do a due diligence, and like we said, nobody owns has the monopoly over knowledge, but then we do our research, and we
Well,
stand to be corrected.
yeah,
As Professor Pierre Olumumba will say all the time, we stand to be corrected on every opinion.
right. Many
Regardless.
people feel
Yes.
that Dr. King, they tried to pit Dr. King against Malcolm in what I call a false dichotomy. And these are people
Mm-hmm.
who don't follow Dr. King or Malcolm. So intellectually, they don't even deserve the right to then make that dichotomy statement unless you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, examine both sides and then choose a side. Um, the FBI wiretap from Dr. King was one of the most extensive wiretap in the country. And that wiretap initially was approved by Robert Kennedy himself as Attorney General and signed off on by President John F. Kennedy. They're the ones that
Mm-hmm.
started the COINTELPRO operation against Dr. King, with J. Edgar Hoover carrying it out. And that lasted right up to his death. Anyone who've done the research, and there's a lot of books that you can do on the death of Dr. King, you will find that there's enough evidence to show Army intelligence is there on a building top with armed people on the day he got killed. You would find that the first people that was interviewed pointed in a completely different direction for those shots than the ones that we began to hear on the news with the James R. Ray story. And there's all kinds of work. Study the work. The report that the Congress did on the death of Dr. King, which you can go and research, they put together a subcommittee on his assassination and said that James R. Ray did not kill him and admit that the government was involved in his killing. Our government have admitted that in writing, officially.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something the media pushed, you see, because the media is owned by the same corporate structures that run the government. And so we have to, those of us who would think things like that would have to stop and start thinking and look at what he accomplished with his life. You know, the work that he did. When we say a civil rights act, that's a bill this thick that's full of rules and regulations that every state and every government must abide by as regarding the African peoples.
Mm-hmm.
If you would let me just for 1 minute, just take a drink of water just for a minute, and I'll be right back.
That's very okay. That's very okay. Wow. Thank you for your comments. Very interesting. Share your impressions, share your your comments with us in the chat, and I bring them up to the chat. I see very interesting comments, and that's very okay. Every opinion matters here. We are voices of Africans worldwide, at home and abroad. Yes. So this week we actually are going through the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. week, and this week introduces us automatically into Black History Month, which actually starts officially in February. So you see that most of the history, if like Professor James is saying, if you don't know your history, you cannot erase the mystery. And so Africa, we would not understand Africa without knowing actually our own stories in the various communities in which we are operating, be it on the continent or abroad. And do remember, Pan African Daily TV connects Africans worldwide, regardless of your locations. An African is an African at home and abroad. And for point of correction, Africans bear the world, be it in Germany, America, Caribbean, and everywhere, where origins here from the beginning. So actually, the world is up to us. Okay. Whether we are reporting from Germany, or we're reporting from America, or we're reporting from the Caribbean, or from the continent, or from Asia, or from everywhere, the original people of the world are set by intellectuals and professors, and facts that are proven by the Kemet history has shown that the origins of civilizations was everywhere. So I want to thank all of you that are signing in. Thank you for your comments, your opinion, your feedbacks. If you have a comment or a feedback or a question regarding Dr. Martin Luther King, regarding Pan-Africanism, regarding Africans, regarding how we can unite and build the Africa that we want, please drop it in the chat and we will bring it up. Yes. Thank you, Prof. You're back. Is
Yes,
it
ma'am.
okay? Are you okay?
Yes, ma'am. I'm good.
Thank you. So, yes, you were saying something like that. There too much opinions and out there, but I think the one thing that we're doing is we are paying tribute to our
Right.
ancestors that stood up for the voice of the voiceless. And this particular character, for him, it was not about black, as a matter of fact. It was about injustice. It was about, and when he even finished that dream, like you said, as a minister, was a unifying factor. Is it correct to say that?
It is partially correct to say that. We
Mm,
should say it wasn't just about black, because you see, white people were not suffering the same thing we were suffering. They were bringing about the suffering, or they were tolerating those who were inflicting the suffering. And what he was doing was presenting to the white American community that had been a party for 400 years. See, it's something if you make a mistake and you misunderstood something for 50 years, not even 50, for 10 years, 5 years, but you don't misunderstood murdering people for 400 years. That's a practice. That's a behavior. Okay. And you're profiting generation after generation from murdering these people, misusing these people. He's speaking against that. This is real. The genocide of African peoples in North America is not a fantasy. That's the reality. It's a historical fact. So he's speaking for his black people, but he's also speaking as a Christian representative of the consciousness called Christ for the world of people to behave in a manner that bequits being called humans. Because genocide was being practiced against his people on a daily basis. Economic genocide, political genocide, cultural genocide, physical genocide. And all of that is still going on even today in America. The press cover it up much better than they used to, but not too much have changed. About as many black men are murdered by the policemen who are primarily white as was done in the days of Dr. King, maybe more. The economic genocide against the black community is more putrid today than it was in the days of Dr. King. The cultural genocide in our schools is more dangerous today than it was under Dr. King. So the things he was fighting for was real. People are dying. People are living in poverty that don't have to because of behavior of one group that profit by the impoverishment of another group. And there's no way the white world or white America can get away from taking the responsibility for the crimes against Africans. What should be appreciated is that in our Africanness, we're offering you a chance for vindication. Listen, there's an opportunity for you to do the right thing. But that doesn't relieve you of the contradiction of historical behavior. And if people aren't willing to learn that, they aren't willing to change the world. And then everything remains the same. And the fighting between people continue. What he was saying, that you could change all this, that's what the I Have a Dream piece is about, is that all that what I described in that speech could be changed if you look at it from the perspective of the stream concept. And that's still true. But he was not fighting for everybody to the exclusion of being particular. He was fighting particularly for the Black folks, but specifically for all folks. He wanted justice for everyone. But in the case we found ourselves in America, the primary injustice was against the African population, not the European population. And so that has been true throughout history. And in order for that to change around the world, history must tell the truth about the crimes against humanity committed against African people, and what are the corrective measures that must be put in place so that those crimes comes to an end, and so that we as a people of the world can live together in peace. But we can't live together in peace by me accepting you being my oppressor and not doing nothing about it.
Absolutely.
And except dreaming and praying, that's not sufficient, because eventually other options will come into play. Did that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. This era where we have these three legends or champions who actually stood for this process of injustice, and we have ancestor Malcolm X. We had also Muhammad Ali, because I think he also actually articulated against the Vietnamese War, isn't it? And even refused to be a part.
Well,
and was brought to jail.
Well, all three of them represent the larger African community in America. Muhammad Ali is coming out of a city, what's the name of his hometown?
Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes.
One of the most racist states in America in terms of overt state practice. And so he is responding against that racism and that practice of genocide that had been going on before his birth. He grew up in it. You know, even before he joins the Nation of Islam, he throws his gold medal from the Olympic in the river because of the discrimination against him when he comes back home. You know, so he's already protesting, not based on an incident with him, but against what he grew up in. All of us saw it as we grew up in America. I saw it. You had to live in it. You had to walk out every day wondering if you're going to get back home at night. That was our reality. So it isn't something we had to see in the book or something somebody had to do to us as a particular person. This was the status quo for our general population. And so Muhammad Ali is one of those young men who, like a Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King, raised up in a family that pointed these things out to them, that talked to them about the history, that showed them what injustice was, and they grew up to fight against these things, you know? And though we know Muhammad Ali, he wasn't alone. He had his brother's support. He had his mom and dad's support, you know? But he was the one that had the courage to go take it out to the world, because his talent put him in that arena where he would be listened to, where he would be heard. And he chose to tell the truth on behalf of the people he felt was being oppressed. When he refused to fight in Vietnam, he refused to go in the military, and he refused to fight in Vietnam because he felt that war was unjust, that it was not fair for me to go fight with you, the government of America, against someone else you say is oppressing their people while you're oppressing me. That's a contradiction. And that contradiction, he wanted to make clear. I don't have freedom here in America, so you tell me to go over there and fight for someone's freedom. Give me my freedom. And then I can see what freedom looks like to someone else. Malcolm X, who grew up in the Midwest, whose father was a member of the Marcus Garvey movement, and so was his mother, that was trying to organize the African world. And then he grew up in his teen life in Boston in a very middle-class entrepreneurial part of his family. He saw the contradiction. So he didn't convert to being Malcolm X when he joined the nation. He converted from being someone who used drugs and alcohol to silence himself from responding to tyranny. See, that's why most of us drink, because we don't know how to fight the power that's hurting us. So we turn to alcohol, we turn to drugs, because we don't know how to fight back. Well, the Nation of Islam gave him that pathway, you know, because Malcolm had 4 brothers in the nation and 3 sisters before him. And it was his brothers and sisters that brought him into that teaching and that understanding. And it was Elijah Muhammad that gave him that opportunity to teach. But Elijah had children who grew up in the nation, but they weren't the teachers, right? There were hundreds of other Black men in the nation before Malcolm, but none of them was a Malcolm X. So Malcolm X brought to the nation something. And the nation gave him an opportunity to express that something. Same thing with Dr. King. There were hundreds of Baptist ministers in the South before Dr. King. The difference between him and the hundreds of others. His family and his experience and his training and his tutoring and his tooling gave him something to bring to the table that the others didn't have. Along with the Spirit of God, of course, and the Spirit of the ancestors, which are primary in determining how we would behave. And so they saw themselves as instruments to be used for a people's fight for freedom. And in their different arenas, in their different places, they allowed themselves to be used in that way. And the system did everything they could to destroy them and ostracize them. And in 2 cases, outright murdered 2 of them, of those 3.
Wow. History would erase the mystery.
Absolutely.
Your history. Thank you so very much, Baba, for teaching us. I mean, for your lessons. There's a lessons otherwise we would not have. We never read in school. Now, there's a term that it's commonly referred to them like the leader of the civil rights movement. How would you describe that? That should be the last thing we will talk about. I know it's trainers. What is the civil rights movement referred to, or what is that actually?
Well, that's again white press trying to frame the Black movement. Black people were fighting all over America. And the basic movement was a movement for freedom. It was our freedom movement. Civil rights was one of the things that the freedom movement was fighting for. Human rights was something else the freedom movement was fighting for. But white people didn't want to deal with the term human rights because they would have to face the United Nations Charter against human rights discrimination and the violation of people's human rights. So they used the white press, which is owned by corporate structures, to couch our battle as civil rights. And then to try to divide Black people, they said those who was fighting in the 5 or 6 southern states was fighting for civil rights. And the Blacks that live in the other 30-something states, I don't know what they're fighting for. So the overwhelming majority of Black people who was sending the money to the South to help the others, who was getting on buses and coming down to the South to help the others, we don't get counted unless you study history. See? Because if you don't study history, you won't see Harold Belafonte and Sidney Poitier landing with Kwame Ture in a plane in a cornfield to bring money to help Dr. Martin Luther King in the middle of the friggin' night. So you don't see the relationship of Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in New York to the fundraising and money support they're raising in the North to help the people in Alabama, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And so the white press would make you think this is something that's just happening in Mississippi, Arkansas, and Alabama, and Georgia. No, this is happening in the Black community all across America. America was segregated New York City right now is more segregated in the school system than the school system in Mississippi in 1954. Okay? You want to know truth? Truth will set you free. Malcolm referred to it as de facto segregation, meaning they didn't acknowledge that it wasn't the law, it was just the practice. In the South, segregation was the law, or apartheid was the law. In the North, apartheid wasn't the law, but apartheid was the practice. You understand? So Northerners wanted to minimize the impact of the struggle by keeping it in the southern part of America, while pretending that in the rest of America, these crimes were not being committed against Black people. And so it's in that environment that this term civil rights movement evolved in the white press. And it pushed by our white so-called left-wing supporters who had their own interest in making sure we didn't stop the discrimination in the North, because they were making billions of dollars discriminating against Black people in the North, Midwest, and West. Hundreds of billions. There's a good book. I always like to recommend books, you know. It's called Plural But Equal. Plural But Equal by Dr. Harold Cruz. He does an analysis of the so-called civil rights movement, and he will let you learn a lot of these things. Who was truly our friend and who's truly our enemy.
What's the name of the book again? Plural?
Plural. Plurel.
P-L-U what?
Oh, there it goes.
Plural but equal.
I
want to put it in the chat.
By Dr.
Plural
Harold.
but equal. Okay.
His name is Dr. Harold Cruz. Brilliant scholar. He taught at Columbia University. And you don't get to Columbia, Black or white, unless you're absolutely brilliant. He was a comrade of Charles Hamilton, who was an extraordinary scholar in his own right. So a lot of the research has been done. I tell our young people, read the works that have been done. Your elders have left you a lot of literature to study, so you can see what happened in the past and you can better decide what you're going to do in the future. And we come back to our great prince, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
Who studied heavily in order to articulate the condition of your people out of poverty to the rest of the world so they hear you. You have to study. You have to do research. And then you have to give yourself the tools and the skills necessary to tell the story of your people. And he did that better than anybody. And then to move masses of people against the system itself, you see, and stop the machinery of government and make them pay attention to the crime against our people. So I thought he was weak when I was a youth because he wasn't militant sounding like Malcolm. So I'm guilty of that. But I would learn that this man is an extraordinary person. You got to study and see. And I was in that movement. I'm not an observer. Okay. I was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I was a member of Malcolm X OAAU. Okay. I marched with Dr. King against the March in the War in 1967 while I was doing security for Malcolm X's sister Ella, then president of OAAU. You know. What
was OAAU?
The Organization of Afro-American Unity. Organization of Afro-American Unity.
Oh, okay. Just Malcolm like OAU.
Right. He patterned it after the OAU. And ours was the OAAU, you know. So I'm still its international vice president, quiet as we keep ourselves. But the point is, I speak, yes, from scholarship and study and research, but I also speak from being an active participant.
Absolute.
You know, I was involved in sit-ins from the time I grew up in South Carolina. I was involved in sit-ins from the time I was 16 on one course or not. I remember the last one was against a supermarket called Flagler's in Georgetown, South Carolina, where the owner pulled a gun on a black man for stealing a loaf of bread. And we were practicing football, 44 of us on our black high school campus when the word came. I could still hear us running. We got the football cleats on and we running on asphalt. And it sounded like a bunch of horses. And we tore this market up. He was never able to open a market in our community again. Because you don't pull a gun on nobody for a loaf of bread. Somebody in the community would have paid for that bread.
Absolute.
But you in our community and you pull a gun because you're white, he was never able to open anymore. We, the high school students, of which I was one, we tore their place apart. And then our mothers set up in the church across the street and picketed until he sold the building to a black man. So I don't come out of just reading. I do come out of struggle, you know, and a relatively good black background. So people should know, you know, like when Malcolm X was assassinated, I'm the young man that was elected to succeed him as the Imam of the Muslim Mosque, Inc. I'm Al-Hajj Amin Shahid. So I'm not a joke. I'm real. I was his sister's bodyguard for 18 years. And I was an officer in Malcolm X's OAAU. So I come with history of an activist to the scholarship table so that you can understand that I do it. Even if I don't know what I'm talking about, I at least got some empathy about what I'm talking about, you know, and that the gods allow me to live this long. God bless them. Thank you, ancestors. You have done so well, you know, love you. So.
We are learning. We've learned every other kind of history. We've learned European history. We're learning even Chinese history and this. And can you imagine that the only history that we never learned was our
It's
own?
our
And I
own.
think that's pretty. Yes.
And there's
Okay.
nothing wrong with learning other people's history.
No.
But if you don't know yours, other people's history is virtually worthless to you. Because all it's doing for you is making you become an imitation of the very thing that is causing your oppression.
Absolute. Yeah, so one last question about Black excellence. And we were saying if we're pulling out the stories of Black excellence in the African communities, I mean, this would be the role models of it. And I see our brother who is a promoter of the ticket sales of Happy and also the promoter of Black excellence event, just like all of us, is reminding us actually to get your ticket if you haven't gotten that for the 4th of February in New York. Prof, you're also going to be there. I can't wait to see
Yes,
you.
I'm going to finally get to meet the dynamic Dr. Susan Tata face to face. No one realized we have never really met formally, but pray that the ancestors allow us to meet on February 4th in Queens, New York, for the Happy Black Conference on Excellence, where we'll be talking about the excellence of our minds, the excellence of our economic, the excellence of our culture, the excellence of our technology, the excellence of our family structure and formulation, that all of them have to work together to help free the African world even faster. Let's not assume that we're not freeing ourselves. The Black youth all across the world, especially on the continent of Africa, they're on it. You know, like the young people say, they're on it, they're on it. But we want to help them, give them the tools to step up the process towards the freedom and liberation of the continent and the restoration of the wealth of that continent back to its people. That's important. I see Sister Penny said she got her ticket family support, the rest of us, and trying to get the tickets sold. So there's no tickets left in the February 4th Conference on Excellence. That there should be no ticket left. So call Happy Talk. Go into Happy Talk on your computer and do what you have to do to be at that conference on the 4th. One of the presenters will be Dr. Susan Tata, Baba Infedishi, Dr. Asar, Dr. Kaba Kabane, myself, of course, and others. Dr. Harris out of Detroit will be our moderator. This extraordinary historian and academician. So there's going to be a lot happening there. There are going to be vendors. There's going to be culture. There's going to be music. There's going to be dancing. There's going to be workshops or presentations on every aspect of our community's aspirations. So we'll see everybody on February 4th, I'm sure, because I'm definitely going to be there if the ancestors wills it so.
I share, all of us. Yes, for sure. Thank you very much, Baba. Thank you. Thank you. So we want to round up, and we're thanking all of you. That has been a wonderful team to what one of us here referred to as, this is actually like the biography of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which we never heard. We might have read other books, but this is like from the horse's mouth. Like you said, it's not just a historian or an author or a professor or a scholar, but from the eyes of, as an activist, you perceive the stories and you tell it absolutely differently. We could feel it. It's not, it is different from someone reading from a book or someone who has done some research of someone that existed. We are so lucky and fortunate at this point in time to get this history relayed to us from people and from sources and from brothers and sisters that were there, that lived it. It's not a story, it is a reality. And so being a student of Dr. Henry Clark and Malcolm X, you, Baba, are also in that generation now that you're passing the story. I mean, storytelling was our original culture. I think that's the topic that we'll do some other time. Of why most people are saying, oh, why Africans don't write book or we don't read books, because we had an oral storytelling. I remember my grandmother would always tell us in the evenings when we sat at the fire and start telling us the stories of her own parents or her great parents. And that's how we pass this history from generation to generation to generation.
May I tell them, Susan, it's a myth that we don't write because we invented writing. Multiple forms. If you go to the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, which they like to take from us, called Mesopotamia, that writing system is an African system. If you go to ancient Kemet, that writing system is an African system. If you go to ancient Sudan and you look at the Marathi script, that writing system is an African writing system. If you go to the Swahili state, that's a writing system. In the Congo, we left a writing system. And I'm sure in Cameroon, the Mamoon script and others, we left a writing system in Northern Cameroon. If you go to...
Absolutely.
And so we need to bring these things out too. We use both models. Our people think, and I still believe, that the oral tradition is superior to the writing tradition, because the writing tradition capsulizes things as though it has a beginning and end. Okay? Yeah, I do know Dr. Ray Hagins. He's a good friend, an old friend. But the oral tradition leaves the body of knowledge to grow. And it's not just in chattering. We have whole systems of remembering using the drums and the horns, so that each part of history is broken down into segments, and each drama remembers a certain segment and play a certain rhythm and a certain beat, as in recording this history for posterity. And the same thing in the horn. There's so much to our culture. I mean, one day we just need to do a thing just on the culture. There's just so much to the culture. And so both tradition, matter of fact, Timbuktu the greatest commodity we were selling to Europe at the time of Timbuktu during the period of we're talking about the 9th, the 10th, 11th century was books. Africans were selling books to the European world because the Europeans had not even come up with the concept of writing for themselves. That was trickling down from the Roman Empire through what is called Latin. And Latin is not something that was formulated in the Roman Empire. Latin was formulated in the North Africa. They call the people Moors today, but those people call themselves the Garamantes, right? And the Garamantes, and there's another big group or ethnic nation then. And so we need to just study history. It will erase the mystery. One of the most read novels coming out of the 8th century in Iraq was coming out of the Black community, the Zanji community in Iraq, and it's 9 essays by a brother where his chief essay is the superiority of the Black race over the white. Right? Yes, this is 9th century Black man in Iraq writing 9 books. And his main book, and I saw it just the other day, it was on myself. His main book.
It is also,
it's
also, yes, I'm sorry.
No, but he's already studying the racial issue because it's beginning to occur with the white invasion of Mesopotamia. All the way back then. This is not a new discussion, people. It's his name is Al-Jahiz. And the book you can buy from Amazon, it's called Al-Jahiz by Jahiz. You will be shocked about your people and the things that they've done. Your ancestors is no joke. Okay?
No joke. I like that. No joke. That is it. Absolute. Super, super, super. Yes. I just want to bring your attention to what Brother Lee Felder said. He's got his own ticket for live streaming. So tickets for February 4th are also available for live streaming. That's like, you must not be there in Queens with us, but you can be there, to watch it live, just like they did the other one in Detroit. So getting your ticket is also, because I think the accommodation and the tickets for it's really selling out, and they brought in then this other the segments of people can watch live everywhere. So there should be no excuse for no one buying a ticket, because you would have to follow that event and be a part of that history in the making. And I guess this is the first Black excellence that is actually organized for the conscious community and by us, from us, with no hidden agenda.
Right. And that's the clarity. And for the rest of the world community, our European cousins and our Asian cousins and our white Latino cousins, we have no history of practicing genocide against you. We have no history of invading your lands. So the person you need to be angry with is yourself. So put that anger aside and come and join us in learning. Buy some tickets, watch it on the internet, participate, learn, because the history that the whites are being taught is fraudulent too. You're being taught a bogus history, a fraudulent history that don't let you understand the past in a way that you can escape it. You can escape the negativities of the past if you knew what they were. So there wouldn't be any repetition of a behavior that ends up being crimes against humanity, constantly coming in every generation. So learn from your African cousins. Everybody, yes, emanated out of Africa. There's only one race on the planet. We got that. But there are cultures who have behaved in manners that's totally uncivilized towards the base African population. And I'm never going to hide that. You have to understand through history that your non-civilized behavior caused the life of hundreds of millions, if not billions of people unnecessarily. And it needs to be brought to an end. And if you learn history, you too will learn how to erase the mystery.
Ashe.
I see my buddy Lorenzo Small. Hey, Lorenzo, what's up? What's up? That's one of my strong friends and a strong supporter of the African Daily TV and Happy. And he says,
Yes,
I
all
have
the
my ticket.
time. Always. But I began to ask Small when I saw brother Lorenzo Small's name. I was like, this must be a brother of
Oh,
Baba
he got to be
Smalls.
my
Yeah.
cousin. Yeah, we've already accepted that we family. Yeah.
Sure. So
And I know,
one.
Sister Tata, at some point we're going to have to come to a closure. So,
Yes.
because you know me, I'm always running. I always have these
Yeah,
other
of course.
things I need to do.
We already round we already rounding up. That's why I asked the question about this situation, the event. One
Yes.
closing word. We're done. Yeah.
And it's good to see you because I haven't been on the show much in the last few months. And it's good to see Madame Tata in her spirit again and in her beautiful African attire and her beautiful African self-presentation. So thank you, Madam Susan. And I look forward to the next time we're going to be together. And just like over my shoulder, you see Shango there.
Yes.
Behind me.
Mm.
Yeah, there. Got a direction. Of course, you see Malcolm, but Shango.
Yes.
Just as we celebrate Shango in the tradition of Yoruba and other cultures, because of the character and personality he represents, we should celebrate Dr. King in the same way. What are the quality and attributes? What are the roads of Dr. King's character that we need to master in our own character? Well, if we study Martin and look at how he developed and look at how he developed those qualities and attributes in himself, then we'll learn to recognize those qualities and attributes in ourselves and develop them in the way he did. And maybe we will all become Martin Luther King.
Ashe.
You know.
Ashe. Wonderful, wonderful. We are at the great ending it. With the words of our brother Ernest Parker saying, we are in a good place at the right time, at a great time. So thank you so very much, Baba. Thank you. We're going to see ourselves shortly. Yes. Greetings out there to your family and to your loved ones. Logo me.
And you do the same. Look at me to you and tell my son, I'm so happy. I saw his birthday party and he was having a good time. Made me jealous. I wanted to get on a plane and come over myself. So I'm glad he enjoyed his birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. It was, yes. He was like the prince in the middle of the,
And he was enjoying it too. So that was just wonderful.
Thank you, Baba.
My dear sister. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings.
Blessings to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye. Good. Thank you, my great people, my dear family. I also want to thank you, and I thank your families. I thank every part of, our whole systems, our spaces where we are operating. We are on the second day, and tomorrow we're going to continue the conversation up till, we get into our daily meeting on Sunday with King Maponga Joshua. He already said it yesterday for those of us that were here. So I don't know whether it's Brother Tagi or Baba Fundishi or our great actor Amadeus that is going to come first tomorrow. You get the flyers, and in our community. One thing I want to encourage you, please join the community. The community is very active. The community is asking a lot of questions and a lot of Q&As going out there, not just in the membership group, but also in the community. We post a lot about history, just pictures, captions, and that in the community is more interactive, more than the live even. When we post a historical picture or ask questions there, before you see it, it's more than 2,000, 3,000 people reacting to it. So the community exactly is what we are. And I can tell you, most of our audience actually uplifting this community in a very special way. I mean, a lot of people, like, we when we are live, the live is okay, the interaction in the chats and everything, but the community, I've never seen a brilliant, vibrant community like the Pan African Daily TV community. And if you want to be a part of that community, or you want to, normally you should get all the informations that we post on live also on our community, right? But we're still really looking for memberships. Memberships are also offered. Click on membership and become a member. And we want to thank all of you that have contributed in one way or the other. It was another power show today, even though Brother Ennis said it's not a hot show, but it's an informative show. I love that difference. Yes. And thank you. Thank you, Snovia. Thank you, Kwame. Thank you, Ramza. Thank you, all of you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Leo. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, L. Proudness. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and 1,000 again. Yes, I thank all of you. If I haven't given a shout out to you, probably you've left the chat group. Those that are watching on our different platforms, today we streamed from King Maponga's platform. Particularly, he's a big follower and learns a lot and doing a lot of projects with Professor James Moore. And so each time Prof is coming up, we connect on that platform for followers out there, even though we know it's pretty late out there, but we still see a lot in their hundreds watching from that platform. That is very good. It's not just a matter of watching, it's a learning process. And like we say, hey, the videos, the lectures are available on Pan African Daily TV YouTube. You can always go back to rewatch for yourself. And please feel free to download these videos if you have a video downloader, but please do not take off information or replace it. Just use it for teaching purposes that we would really appreciate, or to share the communication and invite one another on. Normally, it is very, very essential that you would ask if you want to download a video to use for whatever purposes, so that we know the people that are using it to protect ourselves, protect the community, protect because in the past we saw people that just downloaded our videos and then scraped it out. For instance, like the conversation with Professor James Small today, and the past conversations that we saw, it's parading on TikTok everywhere. It's okay, but if you would scrap the information and kind of, like, I don't know, influence it, that makes it very annoying. And when Prof reached out to us, I was really surprised because I never saw that, and we didn't give out any permission for anyone to use those videos out there. So yes, feel free to do it, but please do contact us and get our opinion, so that when we are also asked about it, we know what to say about it. And like I said, please don't just only copy it, or scrap it, or the information on it, or cover every other thing plus our logo just to show that. I think that's very, very unfair. It's very unfair. We give credit to all the videos that we stream. If you share your videos with us, actually we upload it, but we give credit. We don't remove any copyright on it. We leave your logos on it the way it is, because it is just but fair for us to do it. I thought I should just bring this disclaimer notice, because it's occurred once and over again. You have a right, full right, to download our videos that we do here for teaching purposes, okay? But do not tamper with the logo, and please do ask our opinion because of the data privacy. Number one, because all the professors here, they give us their concerns, and we have actually to protect that knowledge and their personalities as well. So please do not tamper with the logo. Moses is saying they are trying to reach us or to follow us on YouTube, but seems the option is disabled. We've had that issue coming up to us. Most of our viewers or followers, I don't know, from some other platforms, they want to follow us or to follow or to subscribe, this function is disabled for whatever reason. I don't know. I just try Moses again. Text us, inbox us, and we would actually find out where that issue is coming from. No idea. But we see a lot of people actually, even though the viewership, they always trying to influence it from the outside that, you see very later. But we know who we are, and we know our viewership, we know our followership, we know our subscriber, everything that we know it. Okay. And you know it. Don't be discouraged, Moses. I think the best thing for you to do is just to subscribe on the YouTube channel. Click your notification bells. That's why really most often, the information on Facebook, we paying attention, but not just much. The best platforms that we're doing, like evening lectures like this, that we have our own servers that we actually transfer all these videos to, is YouTube. Okay. It's secured. So the best thing I would advise, just click your subscription and your notification bells, and I think you'll be safe. So thank you so very much. And yeah, we would continue tomorrow on this special day, and it's really also going to go in the sector of a Black Excellence event coming up. So the other three speakers that will be coming from the Happy Movement to talk about the life and biography and take questions about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but also to emphasize on the necessity for you to get your tickets and to know what actually the Black Excellence is all about and what is really going to be about. We'll be getting new faces again for a long time that we haven't had here on the Pan-African Daily TV, but you definitely would be informed as from February. For instance, we'll be getting back Dr. Reverend Shock, Matthew Shock. You can already go to our YouTube channel, type his name, and you will see the previous sessions and lectures that he did with us. You remember the topic, nothing is wrong with you Africans, something happens to us. That is actually his thesis, and after a while he backed up to finalize his PhD thesis, and now he is back again and will be doing sessions again with us. You know him, he's prominent, he's a very eloquent and also well researched scholar that we have here. So yes, that's good. Wonderful. So on this issue of YouTube disengaging or not being able to follow us from any of our platforms, please do leave us a comment or reach us on WhatsApp, and we would get into the details to find out. We haven't violated any community standards for what I know, and whatever it is, we have multiple channels. If you can reach us on Facebook, reach us on YouTube, okay, or on our private streaming website. We'll start doing that as from January. Thank you for everyone that has donated. Thank you. And yeah, he has amazing videos. Exactly, Dr. Rev Shock is one of our keynote speakers, or not just speakers, a trainer, mentor, and a teacher. He teaches on Black wealth, building wealth through affiliate marketing. And not just only that, his ministry is also about counseling and teaching us, deals with post-traumatic syndromes and stuff like that. It's a very level-headed, all like Baba Kamenyi and all that has been always on his platform, brother Tony Browson, all of them, brother, Anthony Brother, and all of them. Yes. So thank you. We see ourselves again tomorrow. You guys have a nice day, sleep well, and yeah, we'll continue in the same spirit. Ubuntu, know you, know me, logo me. And I truly want to apologize. You see, each time we want to play our video, it's just chopping, crapping, whatever. I don't have an idea. We've been looking, we've been going through it, but we're just coming back to say the internet that we are actually operating on in Europe is really, really bad. You can see it for yourself. And so not our fault, it's just the way it is. And so yes, never worry if we don't end up assigned, and just like what I'm going to do now, never mind.
You are watching the Pan-African Daily TV with Dr. Susan Tata. The Africa we want: unity, consciousness, our culture, our spirituality, our history. One Africa for Africans worldwide. Motherland's calling its diaspora home. Join my voice. Join my team. Join my campaign. Campaign 21 hashtag 1 million subscribers on the Pan African Daily TV YouTube. Be a volunteer. Apply now. Be the new Africa.